really, the only thing I was trying to avoid was offending people, making people angry, potentially having someone maybe not like me, which would have been just horrible. So it was it was the sort of most, I guess, the sort of shallowest, but also on some level most basic motivation for misrepresenting myself, was just wanting to be like everybody else and wanting to be loved. I don't know. So I was comfortable telling my children, because when you have kids and they're little.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for being here today. I want to tell you a little bit first about myself and our organization, MIT, and then I'll briefly introduce our author and discussant. So my name is David. I'm a junior at MIT, and I'm the president of the Secular Society at MIT. We're an organization of agnostics, atheists, and humanists here at MIT, whose mission is to provide a space here for our community and also advocate for a number of important issues, such as separation of church and state, science communication, etc. And also, we're currently looking for new leaders. So if you're an undergraduate, I don't think anybody is, but if you secretly are and you're interested in taking over the reins, please let me know. Yeah. Okay. Kate Cohen is a Washington Post contributing columnist and author of We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too. MIT Press Bookstore is selling her book as well as Greg's book. Yeah. We of Little Faith chronicles Kate's journey from Reformed Jew to outspoken atheist, her decision to raise her children as atheists, and her efforts to recognize and replace the benefits that religion can bring. It also argues that non-believers should be more vocal, both to enjoy more honest lives and to help save America. Support. For this work and for her columns inspecting America's outsized deference to religion, the Freedom from Religion Foundation recently honored her with its Free Thought Heroine Award. Kate is the author of two previous works, the Nepi Madonna Diaries, Reading Jewish Survival Through My Italian Family, which tells the story of a Jewish family who went into hiding to survive the Nazi invasion, and explores Kate's own perspective as a post-Holocaust, non-believing Jew at the end of the 20th century. A Walk Down the Aisle, Notes on a Modern Wedding, examines through personal essays the functionally outdated but still hard to resist American wedding ritual. She and her husband live on a farm in Albany, New York. Website with social links, https katecohen.net, and you can also find her Washington Post column. Thanks for being here. Greg M. Epstein serves as the humanist chaplain at Harvard University at MIT, and as Convener for Ethical Life at the MIT Office of Religious, Spiritual, and Ethical Life. Greg has contributed as speaker or organizer to thousands of humanists and interfaith programs at Harvard and elsewhere. He recently served for a term as president of the Harvard Chaplains, Harvard University's core of over 40 chaplains. Described as a godfather to the humanist movement by the New York Times magazine, his NYT best-selling book, Good Without God, What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe, also here with the MIT Bookstore, thanks a lot, remains influential after its initial publication, helped popularize the notion that the rapidly growing population of secular people can live lives of deep purpose, compassion, and connection. Greg's 2018 move to join MIT, alongside his work at Harvard, inspired an 18-month residency leading Silicon Valley publication TechCrunch, exploring the ethics of technologies and companies, shifting our definitions of what it means to be human, often in troubling ways. Powerful Religion and Why It Desperately Needs a Reformation will be published in fall 24 by MIT Press, distributed by Penguin Random House, which is Greg's upcoming work. Also, his writing has appeared in the Boston Globe, MIT's Technology Review, CNN.com, The Washington Post, and the Religion News Service. Without further ado, Kate Cohen and Greg Epstein.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everybody.
Do you mind if I maybe sit here?
So-
and shift down. Yeah, sorry about that.
Hi to you, hi to you, hi to you, hi to you, live stream. I'm especially just talking right to you, and I can just embrace you, give you a hug, and thank you for being
Sorry about that.
virtually with me. This is a real treat. I was like a couple of years ago that we first sort of got in contact with one another. You've been working on this book for a while. This is a really important book, and one could sort of detail everything about you, and it's nice that David gave some details for those who want them. But I'll just say, this is both a work of profound philosophical and political importance, and it's also a really nice, intimate portrait of a family. And family stories, and humans connecting with one another and just being really human. And I love it. I finished it recently, and I love it. And it's what America needs right now, and sometimes America gets what it needs. And sometimes America, you may have noticed, does not actually get or embrace what it needs, but it will. I think your book will have a long life, and it will have moments where people are really getting it, and people at moments will not be. But I just really give it the highest possible recommendation, and it feels like a real treat for me to get to talk to you. And your family, some of them are here now, and it's really a family book. I mean, it's sort of like if we were doing a book talk on Star Trek, and all of a sudden like Sulu was walking in, and Spock and Uhura. It's like that. So just really thank you for coming, and there's just so much that we could talk about. So I think the best thing to do is just let you talk, say what you feel like saying about the book, and then I have a few questions for you, and I'm sure others will as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. Been a hero of mine since I read your book. So I just want to start by describing We Have Little Faith for anyone who hasn't read it yet. And you're right, it's a very personal book in a lot of ways. There's two parts. Part one is the story of how I realized I was an atheist and then decided to be honest about it. First with my children and then gradually with everyone else.
Thank you.
And then part two contains chapters about a lot of the things that religion promises to give, and discusses whether or not people who don't believe can still have those things, and whether we need them. And then at the very end, it gets political, I would say. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. Like Greg, I was raised Reformed Jew.
On the page, I
page.
have very similar background and yet worlds apart. So we'll talk more about that.
Well, I guess unlike you, I was raised in Virginia in a very sort of Christian part of the world, Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And my parents were actually, I wouldn't say reverent in any way, but pretty observant. We went to synagogue, I went to Sunday school, we did Sabbath almost every Friday night, we lit the candles, and my sisters and I were all bat mitzvah. So if you know anything about the Jewish liturgy, you know that means that I was saying a lot of prayers in praise of God Almighty, King of the universe. I mean, that's a lot of what it is, basically, over and over again. Singing and saying. Yes. Everything is basically, yes, blessed be He, King of the universe, who has given us, fill in the blank. This this precious day, this wine, this bread. Never do I remember ever, as a child, actually thinking that the person that I was praying to existed. I never believed that there was a supernatural being in charge of the universe. I just don't remember ever thinking that. I always thought of God as a very powerful, fascinating, strange literary character. And I don't know if that's because I was raised by an English professor, or I just was a reader as a kid, or what. But the idea that there was someone listening to me pray, it never took. However, I never said that to anyone. I totally kept that to myself. My whole childhood, I didn't ask my parents if they really believed in God. I didn't talk to rabbis about it. It really just, I seem to have known, without even all the data that I know now, that being an atheist was not really a socially acceptable thing to believe. I wouldn't have called myself, let me go back, I would not have said the word atheist. But not believing in God was not really an option, it seemed to me. I was good at reading context clues as a child, and we had "In God We Trust" on our money. We had, "Under God" in our pledge. All the political speeches seemed to end with "God Bless America." So I got it. This is what we're supposed to do, and even if America was supposed to be tolerant of lots of different religions, and you can believe in different gods. Maybe you did believe in a God. That was the baseline for being a decent person, is what I inferred. And so I totally pretended that that's what and sometimes that pretending was just not correcting people, and sometimes it was actually, misrepresenting what I believed. So that was through my childhood, at college, after college, when I went and wrote that book about, that David mentioned, about my family that survived the Holocaust in Italy. Just keeping it to myself. What made me stop pretending was having children. That was the big sort of turning point for me. And I think that sort of point in people's lives is often a big turning point for a lot of things, a lot of decisions, a lot of ethical decisions, a lot of, it's a moment where you say, okay, who am I? And for a lot of people, that's a moment where they might have drifted from the faith that they were raised in. They might have stopped going to church or stopped going to synagogue as college students or young adults, but at that moment they think, okay, now I'm responsible for these children, and they have to give them religion. I have to give them what I was raised with. And for me, it completely had the opposite effect. Well, sort of the same, but opposite, right? I felt that great sense of responsibility, and what it meant to me was, I can't lie to these people. I'm forming their brains, and I can't tell them something I don't believe is true. And so I told them what I really believed, which was that God is a human invention. And that was all well and good in our little family. And then eventually, I got the courage to start to tell other people. And I maybe should back up and just say that I was never in any, there would never have been any risk for me, really, of sort of being honest about myself. The only thing I was trying to avoid was offending people, making people angry, potentially having someone maybe not like me, which would have been just horrible. So it was it was the sort of most, I guess, the sort of shallowest, but also on some level most basic motivation for misrepresenting myself, was just wanting to be like everybody else and wanting to be loved. I don't know. So I was comfortable telling my children, because when you have kids and they're little, they don't judge you, and that's the great thing about having little kids. And then when they get older, they totally start to judge you all the time, and that's the great thing about having older kids. And so at that, there was a point at which I felt like, okay, I really have to sort of push myself out of my comfort zone, partly for them. So I started to do that, and I was sort of amazed to find that instead of the sort of disruption that I thought I would be causing, or the distance that I would be causing between me and other people, it had the opposite effect. Being honest turned out to be a wonderful source of, or path toward connection with other people. Who knew? Who knew? So that process of feeling compelled to say what I really believed, and then making myself say it beyond the family, and the consequences of that are sort of part one. I think that fear of stigma, fear of what other people are going to think, is only one reason that people don't say what they really believe. And I think that the other reason is that people genuinely believe that religion is the only source for certain things that they need in life, or certain things that they want to give their children. And that is part two. That is my investigation of the benefits that religion does provide in people's lives, or is supposed to provide in people's lives. And so I go through one by one. I talk about death, which I think is really the reason why religion was invented in the first place, to sort of cope with or explain away even our mortality. I talk about why I think holidays are actually quite important, and what happens when you try to make up your own. I talk about whether there's any validity to the general assumption that even non-believers sometimes share, that morality comes from religion. For people that haven't read your book, they might not. Why I'm drawn to churches and houses of worship, and where to find spaces that can give you the same kinds of things that churches do. I talk about prayer, public prayer, and also private prayer, and I talk about rites of passage and how to approach them when you don't believe in their religious underpinnings, or whether you should. And the last chapter in part two is called Unplugging from the Higher Power. It's about accepting the fact that God is not in charge, which I think is the one thing that atheists absolutely have to do by definition, right? You can still celebrate Hanukkah, you can still enjoy singing hymns, or you can still have a lot of the trappings of religion without believing, but you cannot believe that God is in charge. And you have to then come to the conclusion, or at least I do at the end of the book, that people are in charge. And that the world as it is not something that God made, it's something that people made, and we are responsible for making it better, if anyone is going to do that. So that's where it starts to get a little political. When I started writing the book, it really was about that first part, that first sense of joy that I had in being honest with my kids and getting to talk about the big questions with them, instead of trying to sort of pretend something that I didn't believe, or teach them something that I didn't believe. But as I was working on the book, and it was maybe a 10-year process, obviously the political situation in this country has gotten kind of scarier and scarier in terms of the erosion of that separation of church and state. And so I really came to believe, and I focus on this in the epilogue of the book, that there is a political urgency to being vocal atheists, to sort of vocally, clearly, unapologetically stating that there is no supernatural being in charge of the universe, and that therefore a character in a book should have nothing to do with our public policy, with our health care, with our laws. I came to that conclusion, and since the book has been published, I mean, Mike Johnson became Speaker of the House. I mean, it's just gotten scarier and scarier. And we can talk about things that are happening around the country, where not only are Christian nationalists getting more, emboldened to sort of state outright what they think the country should look like, but of course the Supreme Court is enabling them in that way. So it's a very personal book, as you say, but it has a larger political resonance, and there is a lot to discuss.
Yes, and the conservative Christians, were not particularly timid to begin with, but emboldened indeed. Well, so thank you for walking us through that, and I think it's good to have a summary so you can see that there is this mix of the personal and the political, and that sort of any of that I think is up for grabs as a discussion point now. And I'll just say, and I'm looking, for example, at this article that you published in the Washington Post when the book first came out, which it's neat. It's like what they say, that the sample chapter in the book proposal, it sort of draws on highlights from throughout the book. I actually enjoyed, because I read this piece before I read most of the book, and I enjoyed sort of realizing, like, oh, that piece because the essay is it's an essay that you can pass on to your friends and your family and really get them going. Like if you have people who are questioning religion and they're not sure, if they're willing to spend a whole book on it at this point, just pass them that essay. And it's really one of the very best short pieces that has ever been written in this century on that topic. And it should get them going. And then, and I just enjoyed, like, oh yeah, that piece from the essay, like, that's in chapter, that's in this chapter, that's in that chapter. Oh, she waits till the end to get to this piece, So, to start you off, in fact, I love the idea that atheists are people who are, you say, unusually disposed to getting stuff done.
Well, I didn't even realize it.
And I thought that point was kind of unique to you. That's
yeah.
but nobody had quite said that before.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this as somebody that's like I'm pretty hoity-toity about the fact that I've said a lot of stuff about atheism and humanism already. But I really I love that's one of those points that I don't know anybody that's made that point in that way before. Talk a little bit about it.
Well, the point that I make, and data I think that I call on in there came out after the book. So that was in the Washington Post piece, but not in the book. But it makes sense to me. The data is about political actors and who is the most active politically among all the denominations and all the different religions in America. And one of the interesting things was, the atheists are the most politically active, and the way that they determined this was, you're contributing to political organizations, you're working to get someone elected, you are, I can't remember what all the different things. It wasn't just voting. It wasn't about voting, although atheists do vote, I think, more than anybody else. So it was atheists first, and then evangelical Christians, I believe, and pretty low down, the nuns, the NONES, the people who are just unaffiliated. So it wasn't just, people who aren't religious. It was specifically people who identify as atheists. And I'm interested in that. I really do believe that there is this. I didn't used to think, and I still have a certain amount, and we can talk about this too because it's different from humanism. But I really wanted to lower the bar to what is an atheist, right? It is. You don't have to be a good person. I mean, you don't even have to aspire to be a good person. It is very simple, non-belief. Believing that God is, to me, that's how I describe it. Believing that God is a human invention.
You do say that you start with that, but that you go on to much more.
I started with that, but as I thought about it, and as I wrote about it, and as I was a parent, and as I was a human in the world, it definitely seems to me that essential kernel of acknowledging, knowing, believing that humans made the world. Humans are currently making up everything around us, and that there is no, oh, this is just the way things are, or this is the way, certainly not, this is the way God made them, or anything like that. That does inform a political consciousness, or can inform a political. Of course, also being, in a despised minority can also inform a political consciousness and inspire people.
Which I think is relevant to your biography too, because you talk about growing up in Virginia. Your dad is a professor, and you felt that you had to be a representative for Judaism.
Right.
Like you were sort of an ambassador for Judaism in this very Christian town. My
sisters and I were the only Jews in our elementary school. My mother came in with a little menorah every December sometime, and explained the whole story over again. It was definitely, and we were like I think I say like emissaries from a small foreign country, so yes, and I think. My parents are not very religious people. They're less than they were when I was growing up. But now if you talk to them, I think they would both say that they're atheists. I mean, we might get some disagreement. I don't know, but certainly that young family moves to tiny Christian town. And the biggest town over with the university has a synagogue in it. They're both Jewish. They were looking for community, and so to look back and think about it, of course they were going to do all these things and keep the connection to their families that they were not living with anymore. I mean, they were young too. So yes. We were a minority. It was fairly friendly. I didn't feel a lot of negativity coming from the Christians in the area, but we were different.
I mean, I won't get a lot into at the moment unless somebody ends up wanting to talk about it with us in a bit. The sort of statistical improbability and probability of the two of us sitting here in this place. Having many biographical similarities, and how it is that we're both sitting here talking about this topic. I mean, it could be actually interesting, but I'll wait to see if there's somebody who has that question on their mind in particular. What I will say though is that I think for me one of the things that really marries in your book and your writing the two sort of poles, the personal, and I think we should have some engagement with your family members that are here. I think we should put them on the spot in a minute. But anyway, I'll leave that for a second. The personal and the political is this idea that you articulate. In my opinion, you're my favorite articulator of this point that I know of, at least that's writing now. Which is this idea that think very clearly before you place God or place a supernatural authority in charge of your life.
Hmm.
And I say that, and I'd like to hear you articulate more about it, hear you share more about it, and sort of how you came to decide that that would be such a central point for you. But I'll just share that this ends up being a topic that I talk with students about, even students who are not particularly religious and who are not particularly affiliated with the religion. I'll end up having this conversation where I'll be saying, tell me about the career that you're planning for yourself. Tell me about, why you're struggling academically or whatever it is. And, it will come out that, young person X, student X will be sitting there thinking like, I have to do a certain thing. I have to live a certain way. I have to follow this career. I have to achieve this thing. They wouldn't think of themselves as a religious person, but they have a script that is telling them that this is what they have to do, and the script is in charge of them, right? And it becomes very important to help that person break out of that script. And I think ultimately that's the heart of your book, is like break out of that script. The God in this case is not in charge. You're in charge. We're in charge. We of Little Faith are in charge. So talk about how you came to really settle on that as, at least I would call it, the heart of your message. I don't know if you would agree.
I mean, I think that it's always been, and some of it is just sort of who you are, but it's always been very important to me that to try to think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, I guess. So even the book about getting married, it's really just an investigation of like, I'm observing myself as a human in the world, doing these things, and I try very hard not to think that they should be done just because people do them. And I've always had a little bit of a reflexive, a reflexive kind of aversion, I guess, to something that's tradition, or something, because I just feel like what tradition means is you're not thinking about it, or that's not always the case, because I guess people do think about their traditions, but often it's the case, and often that's the way that we've done it, or that's the way it's been done, is a way to excuse all kinds of terrible things. And I don't like cliche. I don't like anything that's rote. I don't like cards that are pre-written for me. I have a very strong sense of like, I want my human, my life, my experience to kind of go through my head and get my approval before it happens. So that is a very sort of personal feeling, and it didn't really emerge as a kind of political statement until maybe later on. But I do think people's politics and their sort of personal approach toward life merge constantly. So that makes sense to me. But yeah, don't accept someone else's script, I guess, in any way. Whether it's the Bible or the sort of jobs that people think you should be doing, or to the extent you can, and that's our job, I think, as writers and thinkers, is to point it out to people, because there's stuff that I do that is because of a script. I'm not immune to it. I'm just always trying to check myself. I'm always trying to check myself and ask myself and question those things.
So let's talk about this in the context from which it emerged, which is your family. It's a book by what I'll call a philosopher mom, or a political philosopher mom, right? Is that fair? I mean,
yes, I would say I would just go with parent.
Okay.
I try to of gender.
True, yeah, that's all right. That's fair. Although I think people have a lot of projections about what it is to be a mother or mom.
Sure.
And I think that this subverts and plays around with some of those projections in really delightful ways. But point taken about the gendering. Certainly, for me, I mean, I take being a parent and a dad very seriously, and I wouldn't want to suggest that there's some essentializing quality about moms that means
No,
that
I know you don't.
yeah. But anyway, I'll just say, the people's philosophies have always emerged
Yes.
from their family context. That's not new, right? But it's very well expressed here, and you sort of give people a peek behind the curtain. I think you're just to name some names like your Richard Dawkinses, your Christopher Hitchenses, your Dan Dennett's, and love Dan Dennett. Don't want to even lump Dan with some other writers that I don't love as much. But these are not people who are giving you all kinds of anecdotes about their family as they're giving you their atheist philosophy. And if anything, I think that it stands out as stronger atheist philosophy because of the family connection that's in the book. But clearly it emerged from the context of relating to other human beings, which to me is like the best atheism and humanism does just that. So I guess my question for you is, what should we put your family on the spot about?
We got them to come.
And it's not like we need to turn the live stream camera over to them. If there's any, I'm just saying, what should we take advantage of the opportunity to discuss in semi-public here for the first time?
You're not going to get me in trouble like that. I will just say that I will say that my determination and our determination, my husband is here, our determination not to lie to the kids about bigger topics and not to hide from them our thoughts and feelings, as they were growing up, even when they were really little. Extended, I would say, far beyond. It wasn't just about religion. Speaking of the mom, the mom group, I would just shock the mothers in my group when we were talking about the question of the birds and the bees and how you tell your children about sex or things like that. And I was just baffled at the sort of laughing dismissal of the idea that you might just actually tell them the truth. And so that was or drugs. The children want to know, what drugs their parents have done, or parents seem to like to pretend to their children that they've never smoked, or that there's something wrong with drinking. I don't know. There were lots of things, and we were in sync as parents about this. I think that where we didn't see the virtue in any way of keeping truths about our lives or larger truths from our children. And it seemed to me that you were just kicking the can down the road, and at some point you would have to fess up. And then your kids trust you less, and then it just didn't make any sense to me. And I guess we also always felt like they were intellectually capable, of discussing things, of thinking about things. So I don't know. You can put them on the spot, but don't put me on the spot to put them. That's just not fair.
That is absolutely unfair. Somebody please tweet about how unfair I just was. I deserve it. So last thing, and then I want to hear what's on people's minds to discuss with you. But first of all, it underscores to me how it really is a perfect book if we could get it into their hands for parenting groups of all kinds. And by the way, another reason I use the word mom, like as a dad, unfortunately, I'll say, there aren't that many dads groups, and there even aren't that many gender-free parents groups. It's a lot of mom groups because a lot of the work of parenting, the emotional labor of parenting, is being shunted off on the moms. The dads aren't doing nearly enough. And the fact that there's not the groups is just a sign of it, because in fact it's too hard to do alone, right? It's we of little faith, and the parenting is a we thing. And if you meet dads and they tell you like, I'm doing all the work, but then you're like, well, how are you getting your emotional support? And they're like, then actually they're not doing all the work because it's too hard to do without it. You know, that's, sorry, sort of editorializing, but I'll just say though that there's 2 points there that I just want to have you address before we. So one is, my children know how to distinguish fact from fiction, which is harder for children raised religious. You're citing some social science there, which is worth mentioning. And then the second and last thing for me is the profound realization that I had from reading you is that, like, yes, if you really start with the fundamental of telling the kids the truth, you're going to have to tell them some hard truths. But then it gives you the incentive, like, I've got to figure out a way to make this hard truth better for this kid. And so you really have to do the work. So anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts on both
So,
of those.
like, if you're telling the kid something that is wrong in the world or unfair about the world, at that point, you sort of have to think about whether you're okay with that being the way it is, if you can do anything about it. I mean, you definitely.
Yeah, how did that show up for you as a parent?
How did that show up for me as a parent? The first thing, of course, was being more vocal about not believing, because I really felt like, to the extent that America has a religious deference problem that's showing up in a lot of ways in our culture, a lot of the ways in which people are discriminated against, have their roots in religion, and then are supported by the institutions, the government institutions that let religions, kind of have exemptions and things like that. So that's one thing that I was absolutely inspired to do, and then in more writing that I did. It's a process. I mean, we were talking earlier about which of your sort of political concerns or your philosophical concerns are the ones that you focus on and do something, that actually do something about, and which ones go to the, take a back seat. I think in my house it was a continual conversation and a continual discussion about, the way our culture is created and what it means.
Well, I'd love to hear, what brings you here, what you'd like to learn most about from Kate, that, just questions that are coming to the top for you.
Awesome. Okay. This is a little more frivolous, but, speaking of, like, transparency to your kids, I'm just curious, like, did you tell your kids, like, that Santa was fake? Or, like, did you, like...
Yeah, we didn't do Santa. I was raised Jewish, so that was less... my parents did Santa. I had Christmas growing up, but we didn't do Santa. We didn't do the Tooth Fairy. Although with both of those, I believe there were times when we played with the idea.
Right.
We played with it. They knew what Santa was.
Right.
They knew what the Tooth Fairy was. There were some notes. Someone got some notes. I don't know which of you. But because it's a thing I talk about some in the book, is that being an atheist doesn't mean not having any fun.
Right.
And knowing the difference between fact and fiction doesn't mean that you can't enjoy fiction, or you can't enjoy play, or you can't pretend. It was merely a question of, this character isn't real, we are pretending. We're pretending as a household, which is a lot of fun. But I never wanted to do that thing where I was pretending and they thought it was real. That to me was just creepy.
Yeah,
But-
some people actually believe it.
But it's not frivolous. It's an interesting question,
Right,
I think, because a lot of parents enjoy that, and they say that their children enjoy that, and they probably do. But I remember as a kid growing up, we did Christmas, and there was a point at which my older sister and I knew that Santa wasn't real, and only my little sister believed in Santa. And so then, and that was more fun. Or when we all knew that Santa wasn't real, and we were all still playing our little parts, and my dad is writing his little notes in Santa's calligraphy, and we're baking cookies, and we're all using the language and playing this game. It was really fun, but we knew what it was. So.
It's great. Yeah, we do a lot of playing around with it too. It resonates very strongly.
It's a great character.
What else?
A slightly darker question, I suppose. So, as a child, I discovered the word rape before I discovered the word sex. And of course, I was given a different definition of it. How would you suggest dealing with something like that?
Whoa.
Mm.
You mean if a child asked me
A definition
a
of
definition of rape? That has never happened. It depends on, I guess, the age of the child.
You actually mentioned, and I noted it. I mean, at the beginning of your essay,
Yeah.
in a section that comes, I think, in the middle of the book, I told you on Twitter RAP X the. I told you that you have the most you have the best uses, the best literary uses and philosophical uses of the word extrapolate of all time. And I won't get into that, but just in Kate's Washington Post essay, America doesn't need more God, it needs more atheists. Just look at the word extrapolate. But anyway, but you do use child rape as an example.
I use child rape as an example of
Number four,
the sort of
point four,
my
child
sort
rape,
of
war, etc.
my shorthanded in my head why I don't believe that I didn't go through that I didn't read I didn't read Dawkins or Dennett or any of those things as a child or as a young adult, any of those things. I didn't feel that I needed it. I don't feel like people need it. I think it's I mean, if you're interested in looking at the sort of philosophy of atheism or arguments or whatever, but you can just think that it doesn't make any sense that that a real being that people worship could allow certain things to go on. But that's different. That's a different question. I don't know. I really would depend on the kid and the age that they were at. But if they knew what sex was or not by then or any of those things. So I think you can. I'm not at all saying that you have to have the same language for a grown-up that you would have for a 4-year-old or anything like that. But I think that to the extent that they're capable of hearing and you're capable of saying hard things, and I wouldn't bring up rape unless I thought there was a need to do that. That's another thing. But if a child is coming to me with that question, then I think I have a responsibility to figure out based on the kid, what I know they know. To talk about.
Two things real quick, by the way. One, my mom did bring it up when I was, maybe a very young teenager, starting around then. And the point was, it happens to way too many people. It had happened to her. And you, my son, need to be part of stopping it. And we're going to have an ongoing conversation about this until we're not having conversations anymore, And so and the other part to me is that you're talking about the fact that hard things, really, that the point is not like, oh, how easy it is once you decide you're going to tell your kids the truth to talk to them. It's like you're going to at times have to talk to them about hard stuff.
Yeah, and I want to pinpoint also your word ongoing because that is so important, and I talk to a lot of parents about that too, and just a lot of people in general. It's not like you have to have one conversation and have the perfect answer. You can go back and say, okay, I was wrong, or I want to add to this, or it can be an ongoing conversation if that is the, if you allow that to happen, and it has to be an ongoing conversation because it's terrifying to think of, you have one shot and then your child isn't going to listen to you anymore or something. So you get to go back, you get to revise, but you should have the conversation.
Yeah. What else? Yep, please.
So there's some fuzzy etiquette that adults have about which topics you bring up where. It would be, I think most of us would consider it rude to walk into a church in the middle of service and say, like, I don't believe in this. How do you figure out where the line is on which arguments you pick and when?
Well, that's a nice question. I really don't pick arguments unless it's, unless I'm. What'd you say? Oh,
I said what?
No.
That's different.
And I don't think you have to pick arguments. That's another thing. I don't think as an atheist it's your responsibility to debate. But I also tell people that I taught my children that God is a human invention. I also taught them social skills, and so yes, I think you should. I don't want to say you should. I would always want to be appropriate and not insert my political agenda necessarily on someone's, wedding day or whatever. To me, the moment that I think the answer that I want to give, or the reply that I want to give, and I feel myself holding back, that's the moment that I want to push through, right? So if someone is asking me a question about my family or my religion, or and I am considering dissembling or hiding the truth, that is where I try to push myself past my sort of comfort level of just agreeing with whatever idea they had in their head about what a nice mom like me would be believing. So some people would feel more would be more aggressive. I'm just not that kind of a person. And it's really those moments, that little moment of like hesitation, and that's it. So it's not really. I don't go to the synagogue and say this isn't true, and I'm not really. And I think you'll probably agree. There may be a couple of moments where I slide a little bit, but basically the book is not at all an argument against belief in God. It's really like, this is what I believe, and I should be able to be comfortable saying that, even in this country.
It presents an interesting challenge that I think is so worthwhile, which is, I was going to post on LinkedIn today about it. And I thought, okay, LinkedIn, career site, and because I've been working in tech recently, like I have this whole career of just working in humanism and atheism. In the last few years, I've got a lot of people that I'm on LinkedIn with who are just tech people. Like they're not on my LinkedIn to follow my atheist philosophy. I was like, what do I want to say about this book to those people? And what I settled on, because I think it's worthwhile for anybody to think about the topic of your book, is that you're not arguing that everybody in America needs to become an atheist. But the provocative argument that you're making, which is a great argument, is that it would be good if more people in America became self-professed atheists.
Right. I was going to say, I'm even just happy if all the people who are atheists would be more vocal about it. Like I'm not asking people to give up God. I'm asking people who don't believe to be more vocal about it. So I just believe that there's a lot more of those people than we know.
Yeah. What else?
Okay, yeah, we have one from Sohan, also part of SSOMIT.
Hi, Cohen.
Okay, yeah. Okay, question from Sohan. What is your prescribed strategy for dealing with political conversions, i.e., people converting usually publicly to some religion as a bulwark against some other like foreign religion or some worldview, usually progressive, seen as worse? Do you ignore them, call out something else? Also, Sohan says hi, and as an example of this, he mentions Andrew Tate as well as Ayan Hirsi Ali. Two examples.
Oh yeah, what a moment.
Okay, yeah, that's the question.
I mean, you probably have an answer to this more than I have an answer to this. I don't.
I know what your answer is. Yeah.
I don't know enough about her conversion, I guess, or reconversion, or I'm not sure, to speak to it. I guess I have a very strong sense, again, that it is not my responsibility to debate or convince or, I don't know. I'm sure I would have something to say, but about her situation, but.
Yeah, I mean, when Ayan Hirsi Ali was a prominent atheist with, I would say, a very particular political and socio-political worldview, who converted to Christianity recently. And, Ayan Hirsi Ali, if you're out there listening right now, I wish you well. I mean, absolutely go with God, Godspeed to you. I wish you happiness. I wish you fulfillment. Please try to keep your politics from hurting other people, from militarizing the world, from causing more violence and more authoritarianism. But other than that, we wish you well. To me, the thing is, like, she's an example of something, but you're an example of something too. And I just think, like, the more that we have somebody like yourself in the world articulating what you're articulating, representing what you're representing, that's the counterpoint. That's the answer. Kate is the answer to an Ayan Hirsi Ali.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that what I'm asking for is for more people, not to be professional atheists, which she kind of was, I mean, but to just be clear about who they are, and hopefully there could be a ripple effect from that, even extending. I mean, my hope would be even extending into our political representatives at some point. That would make a huge difference. And if they, the more they know that we're out there, the more strength that they have. So I think you're absolutely right. It's just a reminder that we have to be more vocal.
You work for the Washington Post. Have you had conversations with political people, political leaders about this? I mean, what's the outlook for that? Is that something that you'd like to do more of in the future?
I am going to go down to DC in a month. I'm really looking forward to that. To a Reason reception at the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
It is my dream. It's my dream for someone to respond to a mass shooting with saying that, as usual, that either that we need to pray more, or that the reason that there are mass shootings is because we don't pray enough, or because we took prayer out of the schools, or there's no Ten Commandments aren't on the classroom walls. I want legislators to say that as usual, and then another legislator to say, but God's not real. I really want it to happen. So God doesn't really have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
But that's a long way away, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Emma Gonzalez, for those who know her, one of the teens from Parkland High School, who had the famous quote after the just extraordinarily horrible events at her high school. She said, "No more thoughts, no more prayers." And community members of mine at the time, those were back in the days when I was leading the humanist atheist congregation, Kate, which obviously I'm not doing anymore.
Yeah.
But we got out there as a congregation. We did signs with Emma's picture, like a cartoon of Emma's picture with no more thoughts, no more prayers, and as powerful. But yeah, I mean, the leaders themselves could say, right?
I
and
mean,
like people like Emma can get elected.
You know, with debates in state houses about whether women should be able to live their lives as free and equal human beings, basically. And I feel like more people, and there are a few, but more people need to say, look, you've got to keep this, character from this book out of this state house. It does not belong here. So that, I don't know how close we are or not. I will say that there's such overreach on the other side. People are going to die. People have died because of it. But I also think that our politics could move forward somewhat because, I don't know, I feel like there's got to be a backlash to the backlash. We'll see.
We will. What do you probably have time for a couple more things? I mean, what's this like for you? What kind of moment are you having right now?
He's speaking to my son.
What's what like?
That you're sitting in a room
Sure.
with, hearing, I think for the first time in person, your mother speak about her book, which tells stories about you and your family, and sort of, puts to use, I'll say, some of these very personal stories from your life to make really profound and I think very important and very good philosophical arguments. So I just don't know what that's like for somebody like yourself to be experiencing that in real time. I wondered if you might just share a reaction, a feeling.
I don't think it doesn't feel strange at all. I mean, I think we grew up with kind of this philosophy, so it doesn't feel weird to hear that spoken about. I mean, it feels very normal. I don't know.
I mean, the normalcy in itself is profound, though.
Maybe,
right?
yeah.
Because this is something where there are a lot of people who would consider the whole idea of this book, We Have Little Faith, as abnormal or outside the bounds of what they would consider appropriate. And here you are, just sitting here saying, like, no, it's just another normal moment for me. This is an ongoing conversation my family's been having my whole life.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's stranger to think that people are raised in other ways. Like, I obviously know that, but it's weird to imagine.
Thank you.
I think the oldest any child is in the book, in any story that I tell, is maybe 13. I think it was Noah's non-bar mitzvah that I talked about. So I think maybe in terms of the weirdness of being described in a book, it helps that was 10 years ago, or that I'm not talking about you right now as a adult person. But I don't know. Put words in your mouth. But it would be probably weirder.
I don't even know. I'm not sure it would be, but yeah.
Anything else that you're sitting with that you'd like a chance to? Yeah.
I have a question. Hi, Kate. I think I'm kind of interested in the long and short term political goals of this. I know it's sort of a bigger project than just a political project, but I keep coming back to thinking about myself as a person who is an atheist but is also Jewish, just like yourself. I'm Kate's cousin, for those who don't know. And thinking about what's happening now in Gaza and the number of calls I've made to representatives saying as your Jewish constituent, I'm calling to ask for a ceasefire, and just how that identity has felt politically useful for me to claim, and I wouldn't be calling to say as your atheist constituent, I'm saying, or thinking about my boyfriend's religious family and how certain discussions would feel easier maybe to have with them if I could say oh well, I'm also Christian, but actually I believe differently than you about this, and maybe that perspective would be more considered and less easily rejected. So yeah, just curious, like your thoughts about when it's actually useful
Absolutely.
to have some kind of like religious identity that you can use in the short term versus like this much longer term goal.
Overarching
Yeah.
goal of-
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're totally right, and there was a time that I, was absolutely, I'm only going to identify as an atheist, and then, with sort of growing anti-Semitism, well then I'm definitely going to also identify as a Jew. I don't want to, I mean, when you are, as a member of a minority, there is a sort of, you feel a responsibility to not to give up an identity, but we all have a lot of identities and ways that we can describe ourselves. So yeah, you use what's politically expedient completely, and I feel like the politics is the most important thing. I will say that. I mean, I feel like a representative who is a believer but who shares my values is much more, it's much more important for me to have that person in government than to have somebody who doesn't share my values who's an atheist. So I completely agree that using what's expedient, I have values and political concerns that are more urgent. I think that they're related to religion often, but there are more pressing concerns. And Greg and I were talking a little bit about sort of the humanist movement and the way that the conversation seems to have shifted, I think you would say, right? As other political, issues grew very urgent.
Yeah, there have been movements to kind of take your and my beliefs and values and turn them into something much more organized.
Right.
I've spent quite a bit of my time in my life on that, a whole decade, basically. It's just that was a few years ago, and I'm, that's not really like as big of a thing for me anymore. But, I still think it's worth noting, for example, like the Society for Humanistic Judaism, shj.org, and as affiliated with that, the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, where I was ordained as a rabbi, a secular humanist rabbi, after 5 very intense and very good and wonderful years of study. So, and there's other organizations, other atheist organizations, humanist organizations. We won't get into any of that right now, but just to say, I think you and I probably both agree that it's not necessary to be part of one of those organizations to sort of do the good work that you're doing with the book. We might have somewhat of a more active debate about how important is it if it's not necessary. But I mean,
yeah, I mean, I just want I guess I brought that up because I just feel like I do think you can do different political things at the same time. You can keep different things in your head at the same time or whatever. I right now would feel more urgent about certain other, I guess, political issues.
Agreed.
And then there's this sort of background issue, which came to the foreground with Christian nationalism, but is still a longer-term project. So I'm just sort of, I do suggest at the end of the book that people could consider a combination form. A Jewish atheist is pretty common, but maybe a Baptist atheist too, or something like that. It's sort of like if you want to hold on to, for political reasons or for emotional reasons, another identity, you can do that. I'm just asking for both.
Well, look, if you're in the room right now, or if you're not, I think you can see that we're in the company of somebody with a really profound and powerful voice. And can we give Kate a round of applause? you and anybody interested in this topic will be hearing more from her, I'm sure. So just thank you for being part of it.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, David, and thank you, MIT Press Books. We're gonna buy several books for students that I work with, and please consider getting a book. Thanks, everybody.